Okay. All right. So this is recording now. All right. Okay, guys. Welcome to the first session of PLM training. I mean, this is just, I wouldn't call it training, I'd call it more knowledge sharing because I want to know what
Mm.
exactly the industry is looking at and how we're going to do things. And I've given my introduction to everyone, but I'll just, for the benefit of everyone else who will listen to this, is I'm Nitin Chandani, working in PLM for the past 5 years, and I've been based in UK for the last 4 years. And I've got a chance to work with a lot of automobile industry and aerospace and defense. So let's give it a go on PLM business processes. The agenda is going to be a very high level because I'm not sure to what level of detail would someone want me to go, but just to give us a start and a feel of how the training is going to be and how or where each one of us would want to put more focus into, then we could go into the next session and get on with things. So the agenda is business processes. What are they? When I say old versus new thinking, what exactly I mean? What is the scope of it? Why is it important? Where does it work? Best practices, pitfalls, and applications. Now, obviously, whatever topic I cover, it's not going to be 100%, as in it's not to the nth level because there will be lots of things that you can add or remove from it, depending on from where you are coming. But just to give us a start and to give everybody a broad understanding of what exactly is happening, I picked up these topics. So, business processes, what are they? You could call them an effective way of managing company resources. When I say resources, it could be everything. It could be human resources, it could be hardware, it could be IP, it could be your data, anything that a company owns and a company has. It's a resource for the company, and what PLM does is it just assists us to manage it in a more effective way. One thing I would like to say is for this presentation, though I'm
Yeah.
maybe inclined to be team center focused, but it is true across all PLM systems, whether you take Aris, whether you take Windchill, Innovia, Team Center, or any other PLM system that may come to your mind. The business processes are across platforms, are across software. It is something that a company does. Okay.
Right.
Managing, it's basically managing products from ideation, development, growth, maturity, and end of life. Now, what I mean by this
Yeah.
is if you take a PLM process and if you take a PLM life cycle or a product's growth curve, you always have the initial idea, then you're going to develop it, there's going to be a growth period, there's going to be a stagnant period, which is it reaches maturity, and it's going to reach its end of life. So that's a whole process of PLM itself, and the business processes are across this entire cycle. If you think that it's going to be just for a particular section of things, then that's not true because you're not leveraging the whole PLM ideology. It's not everything in there. Also, it is for maximizing revenue generation, cost analysis, portfolio value, or everything to do with your project management, program management, the costing, because that's again critical. Now, if you take an ERP system, though SAP is now having PLM in it, but predominantly an ERP system has been more focused towards financials, whereas PLM has been more focused towards manufacturing historically. But now you would see a fusion of both systems. Everybody's touching onto each other's ground. Like, for example, Team Center has got cost analysis and a lot of project management using a schedule manager. And it is now getting onto Microsoft projects, or it is getting onto resource costing and everything else, as well as most of the PLM systems are providing add-ons to all other systems across the domain. So it could be a
Yes.
standalone point solution which you may want, or the reason why you want is because it's there in the company for a long time. So it's going to utilize this thing, and again, it's going to be business process driven. There would be a process in the middle to do things. Okay, and the last thing is it's what exactly business processes mean. This is going to capture it completely. It's basically it combines software capabilities and business expertise to accelerate process improvements and facilitate business innovation. Now, one thing is very important in PLM. It's basically you want to keep on innovating. You want to keep the processes in control as well as you want to leverage the software capabilities to its fullest. So these three things are very, very critical, and business processes is something which, links everything together as to complete the whole circle or to complete the life circle.
Yeah, Nitin, I have a
Sure.
point here.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. So, I mean, we are talking about the macro level, like this is true for the entire PLM industry. However, there are some certain scenarios where people tend to, mold or mend their business processes to get aligned with the PLM, what PLM process has to offer. So let's say we have a PLM tool which has some restrictions, which has some constraints. It cannot go exactly along with the business process what they intend to.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, in that context, customization and all the lot of things come up.
Mm-hmm.
Why people or why businesses tend to align or tend to mold their business processes to get in line with the PLM tool, so they are ready to move ahead from their what they follow from their current business process to get to a business process a PLM tool is meant for, or
Okay.
what it is capable of doing of.
Right. So I think that's a very good point because people who are not very closely involved with business processes and are more on implementation or support sides would not be able to get this. But yeah, it's a very good point. I will cover it later, but I will answer your question now. If you think about it, there is a cost involved in customizing your solution. Say the cost is X. After that, there will be a certain amount of cost involved in maintaining it. That will be X plus Y.
That's true.
And there will be some amount of cost involved when you upgrade it, because if you've customized your solution, you would have to customize your APIs and everything else when you go for upgrading. So the cost involved will be X plus Y plus Z. Now, normally, a lot of the companies would want the customers not to customize the solution. I mean, there are two differences. There's one thing which is called as customizing, and there's one thing called as configuration. Configuration is something which you would want to just make some very small changes to your system, which are
within the system itself.
Yes, within the system's limitations. Now, if you want to get additional functionality to the system, which is not there, and in that case, you would want to put in, I'm sorry, somebody's just joined it. Okay, so in that case, what you want to do is, if you want to put in more customization to it, people tend to shy away from it. So it's going to be X plus Y plus Z, and the total cost of ownership is going to go up.
Okay.
Give me 1 second.
Sure.
Okay, so the total cost of ownership is then going to go up. Now, if I want to bring that cost down, right, I would prefer to keep the system the way it is to a large extent, so that and also you got to remember the people who are consulting the business, okay, they have a very large influence on what the customer decides to do at the end of the day.
That's true.
So if that person is inclined to not customizing the system will not be customized. And if that person who's influencing the customer is inclined on customizing the system, you'd see a system which is heavily customized. That's my personal experience. Okay.
There's a general term we tend to use, best practices.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so let's say we say that this particular thing is best practice followed by PDC or recommended by PDC. How do they decide that what is best for a specific industry?
Well, that is decided. I mean, okay, I wouldn't call it industry, but that is decided at a very high level. So it's not. It's decided at the product management level. So if I'm a product manager, okay, and if I've got an idea of implementing something in a certain manner, I would want to get a broad acceptance from everyone else. So, for example, if there is a solution which a particular company wants to develop, say they want to develop a destruction and retention strategy in their firm, and the parent company or the software provider or the software vendor thinks, oh, that's a very nice solution, we would want that solution in our future roadmap. They will support the company to develop it and allow the company to use it. And in their future roadmap, they will integrate that as a part of their product. So basically, the company who's asking for the customization is going to pay for the vendor company to own that product. Okay?
Right.
And that's the way. So there isn't a best practice, but as a thumb rule, you avoid customization because there's a lot of overhead costs involved with it.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Right. So basically for this presentation, I have gone to about 2 or 3 different references. You could find the references down there, and I will share this presentation with you in a PDF format.
Yeah,
so you can have a look.
I'm not able to. Yeah, we are not able. I'm not able to look at them.
Yeah, I mean they're very small, like, so I'm just saying that there are some references there, and you could have a look at it later. All right?
Fine. Yeah.
Okay, my screen is frozen. Okay, now this is a very telling diagram. I'm not sure how many of you have faced this in your firms. I mean, I have seen this in numerous companies, in a lot of companies. Like, you know, CAD is in the center, and then you've got everything else around it. So this, I call this 20th century thinking versus 21st century thinking, because a lot of the old managers, I mean, obviously, when a company has a subsidiary in India or anywhere in the East, okay, their managers are Western based. And the typical profile of these managers are about 50 to 60 plus years old, and they have been working with CAD all their life, and they believe that the CAD is the center of the world. And that is how I feel Innovia came into existence, because when I last had a look at Dassault Systems, it was basically everything was based around CATIA V6, and everything else was bolt on that. I may be wrong, but as far as I know, that is what I had seen. And that kind of a thinking fit very good with a few companies. Like, for example, I don't want to take examples, but yes, that kind of thinking fit with a lot of companies. Okay, and that is not very correct. That is not a very nice way of thinking, because then it becomes very design centric. What the disadvantage of that is, people like in project management, the data stakeholders, the people who are in manufacturing and processes and everywhere else, they lose out on the best parts. They do not get to see, they do not reap the benefit of a PLM system. They get a PDM system effectively, because what it does is it just allows engineers to create data and store it somewhere which is centrally located, and people can, you know, load the data from various different places. A lot of PLM industry came into existence using PDM systems. They used PDM systems, and after that, when they realized that, okay, there is more to be derived from it, they started changing and they started evolving. And that's when the 21st century thinking comes into picture, which is the process and data is at the center, and everything else is around it. Whether you want to say design, workflow management, requirements, CAD, so everything else is around the process and data. So you basically have this thinking, which we as business process analysts have to be very careful about. When you are dealing with stakeholders, you need to understand what do they see a PLM system doing, and then you have to approach it in that manner.
So in order to get the most out of a PDM tool or PLM tool, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
to get the most out of it. So if you want to get an end-to-end linking of processes, the data and the process should be at the center. Because at the end of the day, if I'm in manufacturing or if I'm in design or if I'm a program manager or a project manager, all that I'm doing is I'm looking at that data in different formats. So I may be looking at it in visualization, I may be looking at it in a process in an assembly line, or I may be looking at it as like, why is the production delayed or why is it not working?
I would like to add an example here, Nitin,
Sure.
if you may allow. The thing is, there was a company which I worked for, and PLM has this change management thing integrated into it.
Yes, that's right.
They
Yeah.
already have this process implemented.
Yep.
Yet they were so reluctant to use the change management process because they never used it. So what they did, they actually came up with another workflow which did the same thing what a change management process would do, but a change management process would do in a general defined and sophisticated way, and this particular workflow was completely loosely based on inputs and outputs. So I mean, people are still reluctant to go along with the processes and functionalities which a PLM tool has to offer. So I think we have I don't know.
What I would tell you in this case is what the customer did was right. Okay. The reason why I'll say this is because some of the functionality is so complicated, is so rigorous that it would not make sense to implement it. So if the customer is a small to medium enterprise and not a very large organization like Rolls-Royce, and even very large organizations may not be using the existing change management processes because those are, the way the vendors market them is like, this is CMII2 compliant or whatever else they may call it as. So, and what happens with these additional thing is, first of all, there would be a license cost involved. So if I was to buy the change management module, it could cost like, £500 or $500 per license usage. Example.
Doesn't it come within the package?
No. So whatever system, I mean, it depends who's the software vendor. Okay. So let's keep that clear that there's no free lunch. Everything that you use in the system has a price for it. Okay. So first of all, there will be a cost involved with it. Secondly, what happens is that these processes are very rigorous, and the company in question may not want such a rigor. They may want to keep it simple, like you said, loose-ended. But what it gives them the flexibility to innovate. It gives them a flexibility to control their own processes, and they get the best of both the worlds. So what they get is they would take like, okay, I'll take this piece of change management principle and this is my principle and I'll combine it together, and that's the way my company works. That is strategic advantage for the company. That tells you that the company is having something which is different from some other firm. Because if you think about it today in the industry, if everybody used CMII level 2 business processes, you wouldn't get recalls, you wouldn't get anything failing, you would get everything in place, there wouldn't be any losses. But unfortunately, everybody is different and one size doesn't fit all. I'll probably cover it further down, but yeah, just jumping ahead of me, that is the idea around it. Okay? Yeah. Okay, so I have sort of drawn this out, which is PLM in general, with a very large idea. So you have NPI, which is new product information or new product development, NPD, and then you have got market research involved with it. Once that is done, then you have requirements, and then you have research and development. You design the product, it reaches maturity, you go into production, you assemble and manufacture it, then you support it. There's after sales, and there's disposal and recycling, which is end of life. So that's in principle the whole PLM process, or the product life cycle, as they may call it. And it's got various PLM integrations integrating across the PLM process. So you may have DOORS application and requirements, which is integrated. You may have some other application for assembly and manufacturing, like Oracle Manufacturing Integrated. You may have an ERP system at support and maintenance level. And at project and portfolio management, you may have some other point solution in there, which is again across the whole thing. I've not shown everything in it. There's business intelligence software, and there's loads of other things that you can show in it. But just to keep it simple and to prove a point, I've just drawn it in a very simple manner. Now, if you think about it, in the traditional PLM world, the major place where this works is the design and production. That's it.
Yeah, manufacturing. Yeah.
Even if you take it across industries, across firms, large, medium, small, what they tend to do is they just tend to do the design and production. That's it. For them, that's the PLM system to a very, very large extent. And they would do very little of requirements and very little of support and maintenance or whatever. I have worked in a firm wherein in 2010, 2011, I saw them working with paper and PDFs where one person was literally scanning documents in the system. That's all that person was doing. So even in today's world, you have got firms which are very, very paper-based. And yes, they are evolving because they know in order to get to the 21st century and to get to the growth level, they need much sophisticated systems in place. So as a business process person, the scope of PLM would be across domain, across that whole thing, across the whole product lifecycle management software. Your business processes will go across the whole thing, right from the start to the finish. You may have the whole business process. All right?
Yeah.
Okay, now let's think about why are they important. I mean, everybody speaks about business processes and, you know, what is it and why do you want to do it. So let's spend a few minutes understanding like why are they important. The IT people would think that it's an IT system change, and unfortunately, if you've got an exec, which is a CEO or a CIO or a CTO, who thinks that it's an IT system change, you are in a soup. You are going to fail.
Yeah.
You are going to fail miserably because business process is not an IT system change. It is the way your organization works. It is the way your people interact with each other. It is the way you do business. So if you want to change your business process, it's not an IT system change. It is the way you conduct business.
We can term it as business reengineering.
Yeah, you could call it various things that you want. Business reengineering, yes. You could call it change management. Yes, you could say that the company is undergoing a change or is going cost cutting, savings, or whatever else term you may call it as.
Mm.
But if you think that it is an IT system change that is taking place, and if you've got a senior level exec who thinks in the same manner, it's not going to work. You're going to have lots of trouble. You're going to have, once it goes live, there will be a very large dissatisfied user community, and that is when these users would say that the IT team never delivers. Unfortunately, it's not the IT team's fault. It is something to do with the way the IT and the business team interacts with each other so that they can give a system that the users can use. So it is very important for us as business process analysts to understand the IT system as well as the business. Okay. Now,
yeah.
It is basically the responsibility of the entire organization. Normally, like I said, in the olden world or in the old way of thinking where you have PDM in the center or you've got CAD in the center, the business team tends to think that it is the responsibility of the IT team or the engineering team to implement it, and the business team is not going to be bothered about it. But that's not true. It's going to affect everybody in the organization because the project managers depend upon the business processes for something, somebody else would depend upon it for something else. like the business intelligence or the dashboards depend on PLM system. So it is dependent across the organization, and we do not want to be in a position where we say it is your responsibility and it is not my responsibility. It is everybody's responsibility. Business processes also give you cost reductions. So if you like, you'd prevent recalls, you would maintain maturity of things. And by cost reductions is basically what I mean is, if you've got an assembly line where somebody is fitting a door to the car, okay, that's the job that he does, and it takes him 20 minutes to fit that door. Now, if you've got a business process which says that first he's got to take the spammer, put the nut, or whatever else you may call it as, that's a business process which you've defined. Now, if you as an engineer are sitting down and thinking about that process, and if you can bring in savings of, say, about a minute, like, if it takes 20 minutes for that guy to fit the door, and you can save a minute on him, and you can make him do it in 19 minutes, that 1 minute saving over a period of time would result in him increasing the number of doors he's fitting. And that would give you a lot of cost reductions, because it is preventing people from taking more time to do it, as well as it will give you process efficiencies. So your process has become more efficient, and without adding any more capex or without increasing the production capacity, you've got an additional door or you've got an additional car built by just changing a few things of what the person does, right? Also, you are going to reduce wastage and increase innovation. So if you allow people the freedom to use the system as they would want to be used, rather than saying them that, no, you have to use it in this way because that's the set standard, you are going to hamper innovation to a certain extent. You need to give them the flexibility to innovate so that they have the chance to do that. And as well as the business processes, when I say they reduce wastage, it's like, if you've got multiple products across a program, and if you've got a nut and a bolt that fits on it, and you don't have to repurchase it for everything else, you can reuse that component in various different parts if it is applicable. Otherwise, you'd have to keep redesigning it, purchasing it again, and if you do not have a business process that keeps track of all of this, you wouldn't know it. Also, business processes are going to help you for best practices. So you could implement total quality management, Six Sigma, Prince 2, CMII, or whichever other business process you may want to apply to your company. You can do it. The business processes also give you sustainability and competitive advantage. This is very important because no two organizations are the same. Even when I was with the various automobile industry in UK, every automobile, even though they were a part of a parent group, they had their own way of doing things, and that made them different from each other, and that gave them that advantage from each other because they thought they did it in the best manner, which is true, which is perfect for that kind of company, and somebody else thought they did it in a better manner, which is again true because that is the best part for their company. Also, with business processes, you got to reuse stuff, reuse your processes. Do not keep re-engineering it. If you've got something good going, just continue with it. Try to bring about efficiencies rather than trying to re-engineer it over and over again just because a new set standard has been developed. It may be good across the industry, however, it may cause trouble to you as an individual, and you need to ensure what is it that you want to do. Finally, I put this together. It was like a business process management is about changing and transforming organization in an evolutionary or revolutionary style. It realizes their true potential and hardwires the intrinsic knowledge, which is difficult to emulate, thus giving a sustained competitive advantage over their rivals. I've basically captured everything about the business processes in a sentence to give everyone a feel of what exactly a business process is. All right? Hello?
It's good.
Yep,
Yeah,
okay. I wasn't sure if anyone is there.
I guess.
Any questions on the slide, or was it too high level and
No, I wouldn't say that was too high level. That is good.
okay?
Yeah, nobody's talking except me.
Yep, that's fine. I will continue. Okay, so business processes, how do they work? You've got various industries. You've got heavy engineering industries, and these are aging industries. These are ailing industries. These are industries which have been there for a very, very long time. I mean, the steel industry, the automobile industry, the aerospace and defense industry. You can think about it, the shipping industry. They have been there since ages and ages. Over a period of time, they've got discrete processes and point solutions for whatever problems they thought they had. They have, or they had, a lot of paper-based, ad hoc, and people-dependent processes. So basically what happens is that if I want to get a job done and I know the person who's involved in that process, I would just go to him and say, hey, can you get it done? So that's ad hoc, that there isn't a process to be followed. Also, a lot of the processes have been inflexible, rigid, and it's been a black hole, essentially. I mean, I've heard comments being passed by various people that say that, oh, I don't know what happens out there, but I know in the end I get this. So either they do not want to investigate their time in that stuff that happens, that they get the end product because they think it is too complicated to touch it, or they just think that, okay, it's going on for such a long time, I don't want to disturb it, and I will just let it go on. Also, these processes have been very lengthy. There have been a lot of rework, there have been a lot of recall, and there's been tremendous wastage of labor, money, and time, which I do not need to give an example. You could just open up any news item today, you'd get somebody calling back something. A couple of days back, or I think a week back, you had BMW calling back 1.3 million cars because they thought that the battery wire is overheating and they need to replace it, otherwise it's going to burn the car. And that was basically for a period of, I think, 2004 to 2010. So you can imagine the various different industries. There have been lots of cases in the US with the car industry, and with any other electrical appliances you take, like Nokia is going to recall its batteries or whatever else. It's again down to, did they follow the process, did they maintain the spec, did they maintain the maturity of the product, and did they close the loop. So it's basically, if you think about it, when you have an idea, you get a requirement, you develop and mature the product, and then you send it to the market. But did you close the loop? Did your product meet the requirement? Because if it didn't, then there is something missing. Or if you chose to ignore it and you just sent it out to the market, then it's going to have massive impact on the company. Also, with regards to business processes, there have been a lot of challenges, and these challenges have been across industry. There have been challenges with collaboration and globalization. So if I've got a supplier in India or anywhere in the Far East, and if my company is based in the UK or in the States or anywhere in Europe, I need to be able to collaborate with them. I need to be able to bring them on really quickly, get the work done, and ensure that they get access to only certain amount of data and not all the data. So if I did not have a process in place to tell me how am I going to collaborate with these guys or how they are going to come onto my system, it's going to cause me a problem. I wouldn't know from where to start. I wouldn't know what system do I need. That's the reason why the first thing we need to do is we need to chalk out a process of how will they speak to each other. Once we know how they speak to each other, then we can bring in the software, we can make some changes to it, or we could configure the software to ensure that they meet the business processes, or we could change the business processes to fit the software so that we maintain the out-of-the-box functionality to a large extent. Also, the products are getting really complicated now. So you may have a product A which is available in red, blue, green, but a product A.1 which is available in some more colors with some more functionality. So if you've got a car, so it's got a left-hand drive or right-hand drive car, it's going to have 2 doors, 4 doors, it's going to have a short wheelbase, it's going to have a long wheelbase. So there are lots of different combinations to the car that you're going to use. Also, what happens is that the platform of those cars are going to be used in various different productions. So these products are getting increasingly complicated, and if you do not have a process to maintain the information about it, it's going to cause some trouble. We need to get down to knowledge sharing, protection, and intellectual property, which is again the key. As IP is the key to a company, and if we are not able to do that, it's going to cause some trouble. There are various legislations and standards involved. People need to comply to various standards of products, like environmental standards or standards relating to health and safety, or legislations that in a particular country you can't sell a product of that certain type. So the process is going to manage it. Also, we're going to help, the business processes are going to help in reducing costs and reducing capex, as well as sharing risks. What I mean by sharing risk is basically, if I'm going to develop a particular product, I may get a supplier involved as a joint venture, and he's going to develop part of it, and I'm going to develop part of it. Thus, I do not have to take the whole risk. It's going to work across all of us. Okay.
Yeah.
So, if I was to talk about the best practices in business process management, it is important that we understand how the customer is working, and we also understand what the underlying system is. So say, for example, if I've got somebody who knows Winchell and he's working with a customer who's implementing Team Center, right? I would not know how the system works to a large extent, even though I'm a business process analyst and I'm just bothered with what the business processes are. However, if I was to take the customer's business processes and I'm going to map them out, at the back of my mind, I always have Winchell information in my mind that, okay, in Winchell I can do this. So I would assume that in Team Center I should be able to do that, but it may not be true, right? It's going to cause a trouble, because when you map out the business process and if you give it to somebody to implement that business process, they would say like, hang on a minute, this is not making sense, this is not going to work. I need to change it in a certain manner. So the person who's the business process analyst, what I feel, that person needs to understand the way the customer is working, and they need to understand which system are they trying to put that business process to. If they are unable to do these two things, it's going to cause trouble. It's going to cause some amount of tension between the customer, the IT team, and the business process team. Also, we must avoid replication of existing aging system. So if the customer is using a system A, which has already been in production for a long time, and they are trying to move to a more standard system, and in the old system they followed a particular process, rather than trying to replicate that whole process, which may not be possible in the first place to get it in the system, and we may need to customize the system so that the customer can work in the same manner. And we need to understand that why do they do this thing. We need to understand how best we can fit it to the new system, and instead of just duplicating their process, we need to bring about an efficiency. We need to remove the unwanted steps in that process and just bring it down to such a manner that it fits as well as it gives the customer what they're looking for. One thing that we must avoid doing is we must prevent codifying everything into the system to such an extent that the people just can't work with it. So say, for example, if I need to pass a paper from person A to person B, I may not want a step in the workflow to tell me to do that. That would be assumed that I've done it. So, it is a very fine balance. To what extent would you want to put the stuff into the system, and to what extent you may not want it. And that is entirely dependent on the customer. This fits in very nicely with the example which was said previously, wherein a customer changed the change management workflow to fit into their business processes. Because they do not want to codify the whole thing. They just want to put in stuff which is important to them. Right. Also, the other thing which I have seen across industries is across different consulting firms, the larger consulting firms, is they have a set documentation process. Now what that does is that may or may not be applicable to every customer. At the outset, everyone will argue that yes, it is applicable. But you got to remember, as you get deeper and deeper into the process, the type of the customer involved may want some amount of flexibility, may not want to do a certain amount of document, and those documents become very, very unwanted. They do not deliver what they are intended to deliver, and that's when we need to maintain that flexibility. As with product development, whether it's IT systems or whether it's normal systems, I would say to use agile or rapid prototyping methodologies to build your business process. So what I mean by this is, if the customer has given you something of saying, okay, I need to implement this thing, it would be good if we can draw it out quickly, or after getting the feedback from the customer, draw it out, build it out, and say, okay, is this what you had in mind? And if they say, no, this is not, maybe this or this, and then you go back and forth with the customer and understand and get a final basis of what you wanted. This gives you two things. The first thing is the customer is involved in the whole process, so the customer doesn't feel left out. And the second thing is, even though it may take a little bit amount of more time, however, towards the end, you know that you don't have to redo the process because the customer is in agreement with what you've done. If you do not take it to the customer, and if the customer tells you, okay, I want this, you go away, you do everything, and then you come back to the customer and say, okay, this is what you asked for. The customer would be like, no, I did not. I did not want this, or I did not want that. And there's going to be a lot of rework. There's going to be more time spent. There's going to be a lot of wastage. So avoid doing that. Also, the tools with which you map the business process must be standardized. I mean, if you are implementing to a particular customer your business processes, and if you've decided to use visual diagrams, just stick to it. Don't try to do it in UML after some time, or use some other package of software to do it. So just stick to it and make sure that you've done everything in the same format. And also, this is very important, that someone in the system should have an overview of the entire solution. Now, what I mean by having an overview of the entire solution is basically everyone in the system is going to work on point solutions. So if you are the business process lead, you should know the complete end-to-end solution and what is happening where. So that if somebody is working on a point solution, you know that if they make a change to this, they're going to break something else. Otherwise, it's going to be like everybody is stepping on each other's toes and you do not know what is broken and what is fixed. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, potential pitfalls. The potential pitfalls are, again, this is not an extensive list. This is some of the things which you may face and which you may not face, and you could add to this list. The problem normally with business processes is the customer may not be able to gauge what solution you are trying to propose. They may have a particular idea about it, but what you are trying to say is not making sense to the customer. Also, if you do not make the customer involved in the process, the customer feels less important, and he or she will feel that you are and you think that you are the subject matter expert. So that should be avoided. The customer should be made part of the whole change management. I mean, these are very specific to a consulting firm, and I know a lot of the people in the consulting business, and they should understand that they should make the customer feel important, even though you are a subject matter expert. If you don't make them feel important, they would feel left out. That's going to cause a lot of unwanted and not called for, he's just gonna put his foot down and say, listen, I don't want this, I want something else. So we should avoid such situations. Also, what we must understand is if you've got a template that we've used across industries, or say, for example, you are in small and medium electrical appliances industries, and if you've got a template that you think is going to be applicable across that whole industry, and if you've gone to customer A, that template should be used as a starting point of how you'd work with the customer. And that template should not be the go-to thing for that customer. You should be able to improvise the template so that it is applicable to the customer. We should avoid chopping and changing teams, because I have seen when you do that, it's going to not maintain consistency, and the new person coming in does not know what the old person did. Even though we say that there's going to be a handover or whatever, it doesn't work. We should avoid doing that. With software development, same thing with business processes. If you're going to throw in more resources and if you think that the job will be done sooner, it's not going to happen. If it's going to take some amount of time, let it take that time. Get it right the first time rather than throwing in more processes and having to rework every time. Again, be careful of not stepping on stable business processes and break them. So if you are designing a process for change management, and if you've got a approval workflow, make sure that you do not step onto each other's processes and break something in it. So just ensure that you are aware of whatever exactly is happening. If there is a solution that is already good and that's ready to go, do not re-engineer it. Just accept that, okay, the customer's got a good solution and just use it. Stakeholders are kept in dark, which is not ideal. You really don't want to do that. If you keep the stakeholders in dark, it's going to cause lots and lots of trouble. Cost, time, and resource overruns. These are the biggest pitfalls that anyone could fall in, and it is important to have a very good project management team in place to prevent this from happening. Any questions so far?
No, I think we're good to go. Okay. Well, there's always has been clashes between what you think is the best, what customer thinks is the best for this, for the business, and that actually takes more time in order to get to reach a consensus on what should be laid down for the business. So it happens everywhere,
Yeah, I think that, and it is good to a certain extent, because when that happens, that just means that the customer is involved in the process and he's not kept aside. So, it's good. At the end of the day, if we are consultants, the process ownership lies with the customer, and if the customer is involved in the whole process, he would be more than happy to back it up. Otherwise, it's going to give a bad rep to you and your organization, mostly to your organization.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, this is I guess this is the final slide before we go to Q&A, and this is PLM applications for business process management. So again, this is trying to map out the systems in PLM to what the business processes would be. So if you've got mapping processes, you could use workflows. If there's business logic and checks, again, you could use workflows. If you want to know the overall health of the system, market research, sales information, you've got BI solutions. If you want to handle maturity of the solution and to ensure that there are no defective products going through and it's the correct, like you've got the correct version. So if I've got 8.3 version which is supposed to go into production, I don't have an 8.2 version going into production. So you can have change management for that. If you want to have quality control, you could use requirements manager as well as processes to maintain quality control. If you want to maintain products, cost, resources, and timeline, you've got schedule and program management modules available in PLM. If you want to reduce the CapEx and gain efficiencies, what you could do is you could do assembly line simulation, process simulation, and visualization. I had spoken about an example previously. So, if you've got a mass production system of cars, and if you want to be able to build a few more cars in order to break even or get more out of your system, you do not need to build a new factory, or you do not need to build a new assembly line. You could take a look at your existing processes and figure out if there is any kind of savings in terms of time you could make so that you could build more cars in the same amount of time. Also, if you want to prevent returns, complying with legislation, and avoiding a bad rep, there's requirements management, validation, IP protection, and ITAR data management modules which are there. A lot of the industries like aerospace and defense especially would need to ensure that the data is complied and we do not export unwanted data across the countries or across continents. And governments have put in strict regulations. So PLM systems would enable you to maintain those and keep those regulations in place. Also, if you want to have green credentials and maintain end of life, you've got recycling and end of life modules which are available at PLM, and these would help you to ensure that your product goes back to the source, or you've got back X amount of metal from it and you reuse it. So that will just help you to give green credentials to your company. Again, this is not the whole process. We could add more to this, and it should just give you a flavor of what are the business processes you could potentially put into PLM applications so as to gain a lot of efficiencies and to gain a lot of cost savings on it.
Nitin, could you please explain assembly line simulation and process simulation one more time?
Okay, what I mean by that is, if I've got an assembly line when I say an assembly line, is essentially it means is like I've got 10 desks in a place and I've got some tools in it, and I've got various different parts passing through that 10 desks, and at the end of the 10th desk I'll get a product. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's an assembly line, right? Now, when I mean by process and assembly line simulation, assembly line is basically that whole layout of 10 desks with products and tools on it and resources on it, and you're building the product. That's your assembly line. The process is basically like at desk 1, somebody is going to put in 2 pieces together. At desk 2, somebody is going to put in additional 4 pieces together, and somebody at desk 10 is going to get the final product, and they're just going to test it out and see, okay, is it working? So that's the process. Okay.
Right.
Now, when I say you got to simulate this to gain efficiencies, basically, when you are building that product, you may think that if you were to put part 1 and 2 from position B instead of position A, it's going to save you like 10 seconds. Okay. So in a minute, sorry, my calculation is not right now, but you can imagine like over a period of 8 hours, those 10 seconds would get to you about like 5 or 10 minutes of savings. Now in those 10 minutes, you would have got like 10 seconds. So that's going to be like 100 more parts put in together. So, you've increased the production capacity without doing anything, without building a new assembly line. You've just improved the process. Okay, so that's process simulation. Now, when I mean by assembly line simulation, it's basically you could have those 10 desks put in a straight line. You could have them put into 2 or 3 parallel lines, or you could have them, as a sequence. So it could be an S sequence or whatever else sequence you may want. So if you change the way the assembly line is laid out itself, it would give you a certain amount of savings depending on what your process is.